The dust settled over Crimson Ridge like a whisper of forgotten dreams. In the golden light of a September evening, the town square buzzed with its usual rhythm, merchants closing their shops, children chasing fireflies, families gathering for supper. But one figure moved through the crowd like a ghost, unseen and unwanted. Her name was Elena Martinez, though most people in town had long stopped using it. They called her that girl or simply looked away when she passed. At 19, she carried herself with a dignity that belied her circumstances. Her worn cotton dress carefully mended, her dark hair pulled back in a simple braid. But her eyes, those deep brown eyes, held stories of pain that no teenager should ever know. Elena hadn't always been invisible. 2 years ago, she'd been the daughter of successful ranch owners, her laughter ringing through the church socials, her future as bright as the Texas sun. Then came the fire that took her parents, the accusations that followed, the whispers that she'd been seen near the barn before the flames erupted. Though no proof was ever found, suspicion became conviction in the court of public opinion. The inheritance she should have received vanished into legal fees and debts. The home she'd grown up in was sold to strangers, and the community that had once embraced her now turned their backs one by one until she found herself truly alone, working odd jobs for pennies, sleeping in a small room above the old grain store that leaked when it rained. Jackson Thornfield wasn't from Crimson Ridge, and that made all the difference. He rode into town on a midnight black stallion named Justice, his silver spurs catching the light like fallen stars. At 32, he'd already lived a lifetime former ranch foreman who'd saved enough to buy his own spread. A man whose reputation for fairness and hard work preceded him like a herald. Jocks was the kind of man who commanded attention without seeking it. Tall and broad-shouldered, with sun-weathered skin and eyes the color of summer sky, he moved with the confident grace of someone who'd faced life's storms and emerged stronger. His black Stetson had seen better days, but he wore it with the pride of a king wearing his crown. He'd come to Crimson Ridge with a purpose, to purchase supplies and hire ranch hands for his expanding cattle operation 50 miles west. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. It happened on a Thursday afternoon outside Morrison's general store. Jocks was loading supplies onto his wagon when he heard the commotion. Cruel laughter mixing with the sound of something shattering. He turned to see a young woman on her knees, desperately trying to gather scattered apples that rolled across the dusty street. A group of well-dressed townspeople stood nearby, their faces twisted with contempt. Clumsy as ever, one woman sneered. Should have known better than to let her carry anything. Probably trying to steal them anyway, another voice added. Elena's hands trembled as she reached for the bruised fruit, her cheeks burning with humiliation. This was her life now invisible until she made a mistake, then suddenly the center of everyone's cruelty. Jocks didn't think, he simply acted. In 3 long strides, he was beside her, kneeling in the dust of the street, his expensive boots getting dirty as he helped gather the scattered apples. The crowd fell silent, shocked that this impressive stranger would associate himself with the town outcast. "Here, let me help you, ma'am." His voice was warm honey, respectful in a way Elena hadn't heard directed at her in years. She looked up, meeting his eyes, and for a moment, the world stopped. In his gaze, she saw no judgment, no suspicion, only genuine kindness, and something that looked remarkably like recognition. As if he saw not the broken outcast, but the person she truly was beneath the weight of her circumstances. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Jocks gathered the last of the apples, placed them carefully in her worn basket, then did something extraordinary. He stood, offered his hand to help her up, and when she hesitated, he smiled a smile that could melt glaciers and warm the coldest hearts. "It's all right," he said gently. A helping hand should never come with strings attached. Over the next 2 weeks, Jocks learned Elena's story, not from the gossips who eagerly offered their poisoned versions, but from quiet observation and careful conversation. He saw her working before dawn at the bakery, saw the way she was paid less than she was owed, saw how she gave her last coins to a hungry child even as her own stomach growled. He saw what the town refused to see: a young woman of extraordinary character, beaten down by circumstances but unbroken in spirit. What Elena didn't know was that Jacques understood her pain intimately. Years ago, his own sister had been ostracized by their community after a false accusation. He'd watched helplessly as the rejection broke her spirit, leading to a darkness he couldn't save her from. He'd carried that guilt like stones in his pockets ever since, wondering if he could have done more, given more, been more. Elena was his second chance at redemption. The idea came to him on a starlit night as he sat outside the boarding house, watching the moon paint silver across the desert landscape. It was audacious, perhaps even crazy, but it was also the right thing to do. He found her 3 days later at the edge of town, sitting by the dried creek bed where she often went to escape the judgment of human eyes. She looked up, startled, as his shadow fell across her. "Miss Elena," he began, removing his hat in a gesture of respect. "I have a proposition for you, and I'd be grateful if you'd hear me out before you say no." She stood slowly, her expression guarded but curious. "My ranch is growing," Jacques continued, his voice steady and sincere. "I need someone I can trust to help run the household. Manage the books, perhaps even help with breeding records for the horses. The work is honest, the pay is fair. And there's a comfortable cottage on the property that would be yours." Hope flickered in Elena's eyes, then died just as quickly. "Mr. Thornfield, you're kind, but you must know what people say about me. It would harm your reputation. I don't give a damn about my reputation if it means leaving someone worthy in the dust." Jacques interrupted gently but firmly. "But there's more. You need more than a job, Miss Elena. You need protection from the wolves disguised as good Christian folk. You need a shield." He took a deep breath, and what he said next would change both their lives forever. "I'm offering you my name. Not as a wife, not unless that's something you'd want down the road, but as family. Legal adoption papers that make you Elena Thornfield, my sister, in the eyes of the law. My reputation becomes your reputation. My standing becomes your standing. No one will dare speak against a Thornfield, because the Thornfields protect their own." Tears streamed down Elena's face, years of pain and isolation breaking like a dam. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you do this for a stranger?" Jacques' eyes grew distant, memories flickering across his features. "Because I once had a sister who needed someone to stand for her, and I didn't do enough. Because kindness shouldn't be conditional on what others think. Because, Miss Elena, you deserve to know that your worth isn't defined by their blindness." He held out his hand, calloused and strong and honest. "What do you say? Will you let me be your family?" Elena took his hand, and her life transformed like a caterpillar emerging as a butterfly. Within a month, the adoption papers were signed, and Elena Thornfield moved to the ranch that would become her sanctuary and her kingdom. Jacques kept every promise. The cottage was hers, furnished with care and respect for her privacy. The work was meaningful. She discovered a natural talent for managing the ranch's finances and breeding programs, her careful attention to detail becoming invaluable. But more than that, she discovered family. Jacques treated her with the respect and affection of a true brother. He taught her to ride properly, to rope cattle, to stand tall in the face of adversity. When they went to town together, he walked beside her with pride, his very presence silencing the gossips and forcing respect from those who'd shown her nothing but contempt. The transformation wasn't just external. Elena bloomed like a desert flower after rain. Her confidence returned, her smile came easier, her laughter rang out across the ranch like music. She began to remember who she was before tragedy struck: creative, intelligent, compassionate, and strong. But the most extraordinary thing happened gradually. As people saw Elena Thornfield respected, valued, and thriving, they began to question their own judgments. The baker who'd underpaid her hired her back at triple the wages, apologizing for his blindness. The women who de-sneered at her began to seek her advice on matters of business and horse breeding. The church that had excluded her asked her to help organize charity drives. Some still held onto their prejudice, but their voices grew quieter, less powerful, drowned out by the evidence that their judgment had been wrong all along. Jackson's kindness had started a revolution, proving that one person's courage to do what's right could inspire an entire community to reconsider what they believed to be true. 3 years later, Elena Thornfield stood on the porch of her brother's ranch, her ranch too. In every way that mattered, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson. She wore a beautiful blue dress, her hair styled elegantly, but more importantly, she wore confidence and joy like the most precious jewels. Jocks joined her, handing her a cup of coffee, their easy companionship speaking volumes about the bond they'd forged. "I've been thinking," Elena said softly, "about opening a home. For people like I was alone, judged unfairly, needing a second chance." Jocks smiled, pride evident in his eyes. "I think that's a wonderful idea. You know better than anyone what it means to be given a chance when the world writes you off. Because a cowboy taught me," she said, touching his arm gently. "That kindness isn't weakness. That family is about choice and love, not just blood. That one person's courage to stand against the crowd can change everything." As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, 2 figures stood together: a cowboy who'd offered his name to save a soul, and a young woman who'd used that gift to rediscover herself and inspire a community. In Crimson Ridge, they still tell the story. Not about the outcast girl or the tragic fire, but about the day a stranger rode into town and reminded everyone what true kindness looks like: costly, unconditional, and transformative. Sometimes the greatest act of courage isn't facing down danger with guns blazing. Sometimes it's simply offering your hand to someone the world has abandoned and saying, "You're not alone. Not anymore." That's the legacy of Jackson Thornfield's kindness. And it continues to ripple outward, touching lives in ways he never imagined, proving that love in all its forms is the most powerful force in the universe.